Hey there, all you magnificent musical masters. Welcome back to Broadway by Ghostlight. I'm Mark Bonanni, and this is episode 35 of Broadway Jeopardy. Holy moly. If you like musical theater, showing off how much you know, and learning new things, make sure and hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. There's 26 all-new Broadway brainbusters ready to test your theater know-how, so let's get right into this week's game. This is Broadway Jeopardy! Looking at the categories for this week, we start off as always with last week's Final Jeopardy category, which is the Old West. Now, some of you rightly clocked me last week. The Robber Bridegroom takes place in the South, not the West, but I mean the Old West more in the vibes, cowboys and farmers and bandits and such. Anyway, after that we have Company. The whole musical revolves around leading person Bobby turning 35. So for our 35th episode, the Sondheim classic is getting its own category. Then it's Say Uncle, looking at some various uncles in musicals, or at least people who are called uncle. That's followed by Hans Christian Andersen, looking at some shows based on the fairy tales the famous storyteller wrote. And last but not least, we have 2012, looking at some shows that opened on Broadway that year. And we end with the Final Jeopardy round, so make sure and keep track of your scores if you wish, so you can wager some dough on that final clue. We start off, of course, with the $200 round, or the Overture round as I call it, where the questions definitely start on the easier side before I go all obscure on you with the later rounds. Jumping right into the Old West category, your first $200 clue is: according to this groundbreaking musical, the farmer and the cowman should be friends. What is Oklahoma? The lively group number The Farmer and the Cowman Should Be Friends begins Act 2 of the groundbreaking musical and addresses the rivalry between the two types of men. The farmers who want to fence in their properties and the cowmen who want the open space to corral their herds. Moving on to the Company category, your next $200 clue is: in the musical, the manic Amy strongly asserts that she is not doing this today. What is Getting Married? Getting Married Today is the rapid-fire patter song that every young theater nerd tries to memorize. One verse of the song has the performer speaking 68 words in approximately 11 seconds. Several wonderful performers have taken on the challenging number, including the original Amy, Beth Howland, Vianne Cox, Madeline Kahn, Katie Finneran, and Jonathan Bailey in the gender-swapped revival, where the Wicked star played Jamie instead of Amy.
Pardon me, is everybody there? Please, if everybody's there, I want to thank you all for coming to the wedding. I appreciate you going even more. I mean, you must have lots of better things to do. Not a word of it to Paul. Remember, Paul, you know the man I'm getting married, but I'm not, because I wouldn't ruin anyone as wonderful as he is. Thank you all for the gifts and the flowers. Thank you all. Now it's back to the showers. Don't tell Paul that I'm not getting married today.
Looking at a musical classic in the Say Uncle category with the $200 clue: Uncle Jocko tries to rig a kiddie talent show in the opening scene to this legendary musical, currently back on Broadway. What is Gypsy is the answer. Uncle Jocko is the host and biased judge of a kiddie talent show in Seattle, Washington, where the musical starts. He immediately and aggressively bans all stage mothers from the theater, of course setting up his run-in with the stage mother to end all stage mothers, Madame Rose. The $200 clue for the Hans Christian Andersen category is: this hugely popular 2014 animated film turned stage musical is based on Hans Christian Andersen's The Snow Queen. What is Frozen is the answer. Disney had been trying to make an animated version of the Snow Queen story ever since the 1990s during the Disney Renaissance of that time. But though many writers took a stab at a treatment, including apparently Harvey Fierstein, none can seemingly crack the story, and in particular the character of the Snow Queen. Things finally clicked when the story moved away from being a more faithful adaptation of the Snow Queen and more into the sister story that the musical is now. And finishing off the Overture round in the 2012 category, your final $200 clue is the play with music End of the Rainbow starred Tracy Bennett as this legendary icon of Hollywood musicals. Who is Judy Garland? Tracy Bennett, one of the living legends of British musical theatre, won great acclaim and the Olivier Award for her portrayal of Judy Garland in End of the Rainbow. The play with songs focused on the months leading up to the end of Miss Garland's life. The play was later adapted to film as Judy, which was released in 2019 starring Renee Zellweger in the title role, winning her the Oscar for Best Actress. I hope you all trounced that first round. Let's move on to the only slightly harder $400 round now. Circling back to the Old West, your first $400 clue is in Lerner and Lowe's Paint Your Wagon, the gold prospectors have a name for everything. The rain is Tess, the fire is Joe, and they call the wind this. What is Mariah? One of several breakout songs from Paint Your Wagon, They Call the Wind Mariah became popular with troops fighting in the Korean War. The origin of naming the wind Mariah with that particular pronunciation comes from the then popular 1941 novel The Storm by George Ripley Stewart. In that novel, a storm wreaking havoc on the country is named Mariah by the novel's unnamed hero. Not only did the novel inspire the song in question, but it's also the reason why meteorologists name tropical storms to this day.
Away out here, they got a name for rain and wind and fire. The rain is Tess, the fire's Joe, and they call the wind Mariah.
Phone rings, door chimes, in comes the company category and the $400 clue. Finally ready not to be alone anymore, Bobby sings this powerful final song in the musical. What is Being Alive? Being Alive was actually the fourth song that served as the musical's finale during its creation. The first attempt was a song called Multitude of Amy's, where Bobby proposes to Amy. But when that scene was moved to earlier in the show, the number had to be replaced. The second song was Marry Me a Little, which has since been reinstated to the end of Act 1 finale place in most revivals. The third song tried out was called Happily Ever After, which was in the show when it premiered pre-Broadway in Boston, but was ultimately deemed too dark for the finale of a musical. The brilliant Being Alive was then written mirroring the sentiment of the previous song Happily Ever After, but with a touch more optimism, according to Mr. Sondheim.
Someone to crowd you with love, someone to force you to care, someone to make you come through, who'll always be there, as frightened as you of being alive.
The $400 clue in the Say Uncle category is in The Sound of Music, this quote-unquote uncle encourages the family to perform at the festival that ultimately helps them flee Austria. Who is Max Detweiler? Yes, Uncle Max. Max is a musical impresario and always on the lookout for new musical talent, which he finds in the Von Trapp children. Uncle Max is a comic relief character for much of the show, and though the character is certainly morally ambiguous, he does eventually help the family escape by buying them as much time as he can during the music festival. The fairy tale clue in the Hans Christian Andersen category for $400 is the delightful musical comedy Once Upon a Mattress is based on this fairy tale by Hans Christian Andersen. What is The Princess and the Pea? With a score by Mary Rogers, daughter of Richard Rogers and Marshall Barer, Once Upon a Mattress was originally written as a short one-act show for the Tamiment Adult Summer Camp in the Pocono Mountains in the summer of 1958. After tickling the funny bones of the campers, the musical was expanded and opened off-Broadway in 1959 before quickly transferring to Broadway with its bright new talented star Carol Burnett in the leading role. And heading back to 2012, your final $400 clue is... This 2012 Tony winner featured the hit song Falling Slowly. What is once? This is one of those times where I look at my notes to see what clues I've had about a show so far so I don't duplicate any clues and realize that somehow I've never mentioned this show. I was shocked. Anyways, yes, Once, which opened on Broadway in 2012, is based on the independent film of the same name starring Glenn Hansard and Marketa Iglova, who also wrote the score for the film and subsequent stage adaptation. The Broadway musical starred Steve Kazee as Guy and Kristen Milioti as Girl. Yes, they are never named in the film or musical. The show won the Best Musical Tony Award that year, and Steve Kazee also won for Best Actor in a Musical. Falling quickly into the $600 round now, back in the Old West, the $600 clue there is... Before becoming the Sheriff of Mayberry in his own TV show, this actor starred in the musical Destry Rides Again in 1959. Who is Andy Griffith? Destry Rides Again is a fun show with a score by Harold Rome and book by Leonard Gersh, which is based on the 1939 film of the same name. The title Destry, played by Andy Griffith, comes to the town of Bottleneck to help out its new sheriff, the town drunk Washington Dimsdale, as he tries to clean up the town and rid it of the ruthless Kent and his gang. The great Dolores Gray co-starred as Frenchie, who runs the Last Chance Saloon in the musical. This show is charming, and I definitely recommend checking out the original cast recording. Everybody rise for the company category and the $600 clue. In The Ladies Who Lunch, Joanne has the line, a matinee, a pinter play, perhaps a piece of this. What is Mahler's? Fellow Elaine Stritch devotees will remember that Miss Stritch initially assumed that Mahler's must have been some kind of bakery. I mean, makes sense, you know, you go to a matinee of a Pinter play and then go have a nice piece of cake or something. I mean, after sitting through a Pinter play, you gotta treat yourself to something, am I right? But in fact, Mahler is Gustav Mahler, a classical composer.
I'll drink to that. And one for Mahler.
Let's have a family reunion with the Say Uncle category and the $600 clue. In The Addams Family, Uncle Fester sings a love song to this. What is The Moon is the correct answer. He sings the sweetly surreal The Moon and Me in the show. Uncle Fester being in love with the moon seems to be invented for the musical as far as I can tell, though in the cartoons and TV show he would often moonbathe, and in the opening scenes of the sequel film Addams Family Values, he is seen howling at the moon. This $600 clue in the Hans Christian Andersen category is... In Disney's The Little Mermaid, based on the story of the same name, King Triton has this many daughters. What is 7? Yes, in the musical version at least, King Triton has 7 daughters, named Aquata, Adrena, Arista, Atina, Adela, Alana, and Ariel. He was certainly on his A game when naming his children. Apparently, they are all named in honor of their mother, who was Queen Athena. And looking at a revival in the 2012 category, with the $600 clue, among the stars of the 2012 revival of this Rupert Holmes musical was Jessie Mueller, Will Chase, and Betsy Wolfe. What is The Mystery of Edwin Drood is the correct answer. One of my favorite revivals of all time. The Roundabout Theater Company revival of The Mystery of Edwin Drood also starred Stephanie J. Block, Jim Norton, Andy Carl, Greg Edelman, and Cheetah Rivera. The show is a murder mystery based on the unfinished novel by Charles Dickens. The ending of the musical is decided nightly by the audience, who votes on who they want to be the killer, as well as other aspects, meaning the cast has to learn multiple endings and be ready for whatever the audience decides. It's time to really turn up the heat with the $800 round now, but before we do, please do me the biggest favor and hit that like button for me if you're enjoying this week's game and finding some value in it. It just takes a second, but it really helps these videos get shown to more fine folks like yourselves, but it also makes me feel like you good and crazy people are my friends. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? That's what it's really about. Thank you all, I truly do appreciate it. Okay, $800 round, activate. Bellying up to the bar in the Old West category with the $800 clue. In the screen and stage musical Calamity Jane, Calamity mistakenly brings maid Katie Brown back to Deadwood, thinking she's this actress who's loved by the local men. Who is Adelaide Adams? The 1953 musical film Calamity Jane was Warner Brothers' response to the hit movie adaptation of Annie Get Your Gun, a part that Doris Day desperately wanted. But Miss Day instead played another sharpshooter based on a real-life figure, Calamity Jane. In the musical, Calamity is flummoxed by the whole town of men going gaga for Adelaide's picture, which comes in packs of cigarettes, or cigarettes as they say in the show.
Beautiful, ain't she?
Why, she ain't got nothing on but her underwear.
Them's tights, Calam. She's a great actress. So they tell me. She's charming, lovely figure, everything that a woman ought to be.
Looks like a fat, frilled up side of undressed beef to me.
The $800 clue for the company category is... One of Bobby's 3 girlfriends in the show, April, has this occupation. What is a flight attendant? The song Barcelona has Bobby begging April to stay in bed with him, but she has to go to work, this time on a flight bound for Barcelona.
Where you going?
Barcelona.
Oh,
Don't get up.
do you have to?
Yes, I have to.
Oh,
Don't get up.
Let's look at an unwelcome family member with the Say Uncle category and the $800 clue. The loathsome Uncle Fausto haunts the memories of the Antonelli women as they sift through their past drama in this Kander and Ebb musical. What is The Rink is the correct answer. Yes, if you've watched my Broadway breakdown of The Rink, first of all, you're an awesome person with great taste in YouTube videos. But also, you know just what a slimeball Uncle Fausto is in the musical. He says the most devastating and horrible things to the women in the show, and that's not even the worst thing he does, but I won't get into that here. Besides the 2 women, all the other characters in the show are played by a small group of men known as the Wreckers. Taking on the role of gross Uncle Fausto, among many others, was none other than Jason Alexander. This was Alexander's 2nd Broadway musical after creating the role of Joe Josephson in Sondheim's Merrily We Roll Along. Taking in a short-lived show in the Hans Christian Andersen category, your $800 clue is... The flop musical Hot Feet from 2006, based on the story The Red Shoes, featured the music of this popular 1970s R&B funk band. What is Earth, Wind, and Fire is the answer. Oh, Hot Feet. Yes, an Earth, Wind, and Fire jukebox musical conceived and directed and choreographed by Maurice Hines, played Broadway for about 3 months in 2006 at the Mammoth Lyric Theater where Harry Potter and the Cursed Child currently plays, though the theater was called the Hilton Theater then. The story involved Kalimba, a young dancer who makes a deal with the devil for some enchanted red Capezio jazz sneakers, and no, that's not a joke. I did indeed see Hot Feet on Broadway, and it was a musical that I saw. Going back to the simpler times of 2012, the $800 clue there is, in Chaplin, Jen Colella starred as this gossip column maven. Who is Hedda Hopper is the correct answer. Hedda Hopper was of course a real-life gossip columnist who wielded great power in Hollywood for a time, and was also a big proponent of the Hollywood blacklist, making it her mission to root out supposed commies, which is how she factors into the plot of Chaplin actually. Jen Colella brought down the house nightly with the song All Falls Down.
But I'm a voice among the crowd that's questioning your cause, and now I'll spread my doubts among the rest.
And now we've reached that point, my friends. The big show, the main event. It's the $1,000 round. Cue that dramatic music. Best of luck, players. Moseying back one last time to the Old West category, your first $1,000 clue is, this off-Broadway musical from 2004 is an adaptation of the over-the-top 1954 Western film of the same name, starring Joan Crawford. What is Johnny Guitar? The musical adaptation of Johnny Guitar has music by Martin Silvestri, lyrics by Joel Higgins, and a book by Nicholas Van Hoogstraten. Originally starring Judy McLean, Anne Crumb, Steve Blanchard, and Robert Evan, the show was hilarious though played totally straight. As many of you may recall, I collect show posters, or window cards as they're called, from every show I see, and in fact I only allow myself to collect posters from shows I've seen. So occasionally I will see a show just so that I can get the poster because I love the artwork, and Johnny Guitar was one of those shows. And the artwork for the musical perfectly captured the serious but also very funny tone of the catfight heavy cult classic based musical. Blowing out the last candle on the company category cake with the $1,000 clue. The starving foodie Sarah, one of Bobby's married friends, says this is the greatest woman since Eleanor Roosevelt. Who is Sarah Lee is the answer. Actually, technically Sarah compares Sarah Lee to Mary Baker Eddy in the original libretto for Company. Mary Baker Eddy was an author and religious leader who founded the Christian Science denomination, but later revisions have changed that line to Eleanor Roosevelt. Speaking of Sarah Lee, last week I played a clip of the Sarah Lee jingle written by Man of La Mancha composer Mitch Lee, and was anyone else dumbfounded that the words were "Nobody doesn't like Sarah Lee"? I had always thought it was "Nobody doesn't like Sarah Lee." Am I alone in that? It shook me, y'all. I was shooketh. The $1,000 clue for the Say Uncle category is, the gruff Uncle Chris is a most disagreeable man, though he really has a heart of gold, in this musical, Richard Rodgers' Last. What is I Remember Mama? I Remember Mama was a short-lived show from 1979 that, as the clue stated, was the last musical with a new score by Richard Rodgers, who wrote it along with Martin Charnin of Annie fame. The musical is based on the 1944 play of the same name written by John Van Druten, who would go on to write the play I Am a Camera, which partly serves as the basis for the musical Cabaret. It seemed like destiny that Richard Rodgers would someday adapt the play I Remember Mama into a musical, as Rodgers, along with his writing partner Oscar Hammerstein II, were the producers of the original play on Broadway in the 40s. Liv Ullmann starred in the musical as the titular Mama, the matriarch of the Norwegian immigrant family in San Francisco in the early 20th century. One last story time with Hans Christian Andersen gives us the $1,000 clue. Based on the story of The Ugly Duckling, this musical, written by George Stiles and Anthony Drew, won the Olivier Award for Best New Musical in 2000. What is Honk is the correct answer. Opening in the West End in 1999, Honk won the 2000 Olivier Award for Best Musical, beating out not only Mamma Mia for the award, but The Lion King as well. The musical is a fairly literal adaptation of the fairy tale where Mama Duck Ida has several new children hatch, including Ugly, who is different than his brothers, of course, because they eventually realize he's been a swan the whole time.
Oh my God. The whole time you were, the whole time.
And the curtain call clue in the 2012 category is, in the 2012 revival of Porgy and Bess, Philip Boykin brilliantly portrayed this threatening villain of the operatic musical, Bess's former lover. Who is Crown is the answer. I know I've mentioned before that I managed the merch for the 2012 revival of Porgy and Bess, and though the entire company was all incredibly sweet, Philip Boykin was the most kind and generous and wonderful man. We would often chat, and it was so thrilling to see him get the recognition for that role that he so rightly deserved. And as kind and as nice as he was in real life, that's how terrifying he was on stage in that show. Crown was not someone you wanted to mess with. It was just such a fun dichotomy to see this sweet man be so terrifying on stage.
Strike you dead.
Oh, lady, if God wanted to kill me, he had plenty of chance between here and Kitty Island. God and me is friends.
And now we've reached the final Jeopardy round, y'all. Time to tally up those scores for the week and decide how much you want to wager in the category No Intermission, looking at some one-act musicals. Okay, has everyone made their wagers? Ken? Anne? Patrick? Okay, here is your final clue. This recent one-act musical featuring the songs of the Avett Brothers was loosely based on a real-life tragedy. What is Swept Away is the answer. As the clue said, Swept Away features the songs of the Avett Brothers, mostly from their album Mignonette. The album Mignonette was inspired by the real-life sinking of a ship named Mignonette in 1884 and what the few surviving crewmen did to survive. The musical Swept Away doesn't tell the actual story of the Mignonette, but uses the same situation of a shipwreck in the 1880s and the lengths the four surviving men go to stay alive. The dark and dreary musical opened just this past November, starring Tony winner John Gallagher Jr. Though the show received some good notices, ticket sales were slow, and the show ultimately closed on December 29th. And that's this week's game! Hurrah! How did you all fare this time around? Are you sorry or grateful? Or sorry, grateful? Be sure to let me know in the comments. I love hearing from you guys and seeing how you did. Seeing your messages and comments about how much joy this series brings some of you really touches me and is a big reason why I continue to churn out these bad boys each week. Of course, the biggest thank you in the world to my wonderful patrons over on Patreon. You guys are the light of my life, the apple of my eye, and the wind beneath my wings. I love you all dearly. If you want to join in this love fest, there is a link to my Patreon in the video description, along with a link to my merch shop. You can follow me over on Blue Sky if you want to connect on social media, and there are a lot of bots out there and fake follows. I mean, you know how it is. So if you do follow me, send me a little note saying that you play Broadway Jeopardy, and I'll be sure to follow you back. I'll be here next week with episode 36 if Thespis is willing and the creek don't rise. But until then, I'm Mark Benani. This is Broadway by Ghostlight. Thanks for playing.